There's some set of things that you should learn where you can skip the line so that you could be in the top 1 to 5% of your field, which is very hard, but not as hard as people think.
The world's biggest problem is people don't believe in themselves enough.
It's what you create creates you.
The decisions we make become our destiny. One bad decision can change the trajectory of your life for a very, very long time, maybe for the rest of your life.
We follow what we call the path of least resistance. So we end up doing the same thing over and over and over.
The important thing is not being number one. The important thing is improvement.
You can't do anything if you don't give yourself permission to improve. Yes, you may not be a drug addict, but you might be addicted to the way of life you're living, which has allowed this life to be what it is.
So it's not your fault where you're at. You did the best you could with what you had. But if you want a better life, it's possible. But it's your responsibility to get there.
The most important part of who we are is how we make our choices.
The path to excellence is taking the first step.
I have a long, weird relationship with identity that stretches far past it, but it's kind of always been part of my life. So yeah, at 3 years old, given away. So my starting of the world was, I don't know who I am, where I'm at, who I'm with, where I fit. So, someone who hasn't been given into foster care, obviously it's like, oh, I don't know what that feels like, but it feels the exact same as I don't know who I am or where I fit or what I'm supposed to do next, what my purpose is. So my world started in like a really dark place. That's kind of always been this back and forth, up and down relationship with identity, which has led me to do what I do now.
How did you operationalize that and really become like an identity authority? That's just such a powerful thing.
Well, first off, I had to know what I was talking about. So I spent a lot of time in Erik Erikson's work, Freud's work. Yeah, there's a lot out there, right? So,
you went through Erikson, the stages of psychosocial development? Like, dude.
Some fun stuff, dude. And I had to, because I was like, if I'm going to be an authority on this. And the thing was, it wasn't my first thought to do this. It was actually at a whole business I was based around called Trust Your Hustle. There's a company on Trust Your Hustle. It sounded cool. It's cool, quippy little name, right? But it was like somebody sat down, and what you're talking about is the aspect of find your character, which a guy named Todd Herman calls alter ego, which is a very unique aspect of like activating that person when you need it. And if I go back to looking at like my life and all these things, what ends up happening for a lot of people is they don't quite understand, like I call it the ideal identity. Who do you have to be able to embody and live out tactically and strategically this human? And so when I look at the work I do, it kind of came to be as somebody sitting there chatting with me about my life story, and you called it the character. This guy was very clear, named Ethan Willis. I'm sitting in this mastermind with Brendan Burchard and Russell Brunson and Dean Graciosi up in the woods in Wyoming, Jackson Hole, and we're all chatting, eating cookies by a fire. And it was everybody's turn. Like, it's just like a group of like 15 of us, and like, hey, share your story, what you're doing. So my turn comes, and I'm the guy nobody knows in the group because I'm definitely not at the level of these guys, but somehow somebody thought I was a good fit, so I'm there. And I tell my story and what's going on. And one of the guys, granted, I've done this for the last like 3 years at the time, he goes, I don't like it. I go, what do you mean you don't like it? I've been working on this for like 3 years. He goes, nah. And this is what he tells me. He says, in the world of this speaking, thought leadership, entrepreneurship, there is a message and a messenger. He says the messenger is the person has the tactics, the skills, the charisma, the ability to do what they do, to talk and share. But if you don't have an aligned message, it will fall flat. And then sometimes there is a message the world needs, but you are not the messenger. And he says, when you figure out what your message is as the messenger, you lock in. And in that conversation, the guys were like, he goes, I don't know. He says, all the trust or hustle sounds cool. He's like, but what I want to know, how did you navigate being a foster kid and not end up in prison? Like 75% of inmates are from foster kids. He's like, how did you get past being the black kid in an all-white family? How'd you get past the almost getting arrested in high school? How'd you get in the meeting your real dad and then the football identity, losing your marriage, losing your mom? He's like, how are you here right now? That was the thing. He's like, and one, I think might have been Brendan goes, yeah, there's some identity of you. And everybody goes, oh, yeah, no one's talking about identity. You should look into that because that's definitely a thing that resonates with you as a human. So sure enough, I go, going down the little path and I dig it out. And the more I dig into the work of it, I'm like, oh crap, I've gone through all of this and I'm a weird anomaly. Like I don't really exist on paper. You wouldn't, if someone put on paper that this person exists, you'd be like, oh, that must be a fictional character. Not a superhero, but like a fictional character. And that's what led down the path of me unpacking it all, making sense of it all. And I would say the authority didn't come because I chose it. It came because God put me in front of a lot of it. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I figured, all right, well, how can I take all this stuff I've learned and I've experienced and make it something where people can apply it to their lives to be able to make it work? And so I do it the way I actually do it. you look at, Fogg's, BJ Fogg's work, or if you look at James Clear, the identity stuff comes from the backside of habits. The more, it's like you are what you do, right? So what I look at is most people have habits, but they don't realize who they're becoming with the habits. So they're being someone who's becoming someone, but they're doing it without a plan. So what I do is go back and say, well, let me do two things here. You're in this school of thought, the hero's two journeys, right? That whole concept.
Right.
I was like, well, at the end of the day, when I'm achieving something, I have to be transforming inside the whole entire time, or I'm not going to achieve it, or I would have already had it. At the same time, I can't transform if I haven't achieved something. So what I do is go back and say, all right, let's focus where people can already see a result. And I teach them how to achieve a very specific thing through very strategic planning, which NFL taught me how to plan at a world-class level, how to execute in the face of pain and fear and like possible failure, which you do every single damn play on a football field, and then how to be disgustingly consistent and disciplined. And through that, with a planning of who you're going to transform into, we help people make a shift to their identity.
Do you feel like you developed some strengths and some skills from that independence, or maybe even neglect, whatever it was? But I mean, what came from that was a positive?
I think it's a crazy thing. It wasn't positive was what I did with it. I think if you think about a sword, right? A sword can do harm or it can do great stuff. I can chop up, a meal for someone with the sword. I can chop somebody in half, right? So I was given a tool. And what I did with the tool is what was kind of the thing that was beneficial. I think the reason a lot of kids that are like me in foster care that end up in prison are because we end up exercising and using that tool for the wrong purposes, right? So I was very charismatic. I was very communicative. I would go out on a limb and do whatever I wanted. I wasn't afraid of the world because the world had already done a lot to me. So at this point, like, what else can you do, world? Like, you beat me, starved me, tortured me in foster care with these different houses. I was putting shopping carts, pushed down hills, forced to lick the bottom of kids' shoes, like heinous stuff, man. So by the time I was 6, I'd done all that. So by the time I'm like, 17, like, I got a different kind of edge. Like, I'm just going to do what I do.
Right.
And the thing is I did learn a whole lot about how the world worked. And at one point in time, I was going down the wrong path. And thankfully, I fell in love with football. I fell in love with what the sport gave to me, which was a sense of like belonging and self-confidence and self-worth. But I sucked at first. I had to earn that. Like, I really had to earn it past the point of what logically made sense because I wasn't good. And it turned into something, right? But that was one of the things that kind of kept me clean and kept me going. But it wasn't like I had this lesson I learned. It was positive. It was just what I chose to do with it.
So you say you sucked at football.
Yeah.
I sucked at football.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I mean, do you feel like, well, I guess tell me what you mean when you say you sucked at football. What was that effort like to not suck anymore?
So there's, I guess when I say I sucked, like I told by my teammates I sucked in the middle of practices. Let's put it that way. I was bad. I had some talent. I could run, but we all know just because you can move your body doesn't mean you're a great athlete. There's a lot that goes around it. And to be honest, this was the first like massive identity shift I made. I had identified as the foster kid who didn't belong, didn't matter. Mom is sick. I checked out. 2 years of being bad at football. I was done. And I sat in this class, Mr. Howell's English class, in a portable freshman year of high school. After like the football season was over, I was checked out, dude. I had a parka. I would come to class, put the parka over my head, sleep. One of these days, this girl is talking to somebody else, and she gives me a really cool gift that I wish everybody else could get. And it wasn't that she gave it to me on purpose, but it was through her words. And she's talking to somebody else. No clue I'm listening. She says, the reason I'm so bad is because I'm in foster care. And the gift was hearing my excuse for checking out loud. And it was a really stupid excuse. It was in my head. I'm not even making this up. In my head, I remember thinking, like that's a dumb excuse. Like, because of that, you're going to get in trouble. And then it went inside quick. I was like, oh, like that's what I'm making up. That's why I'm checking out a football. I'm just making an excuse. I was like, dude, this sounds like me. And I remember going home, and it was like 15 years old. And my dad, like he is a welder, had welded this dumbbell, and I would sit at the corner of my bed and do bicep curls. I had a mirror opposite, like a small one. I would get up and like curl and look at myself because I'm a 15-year-old boy. You do stuff like that. I remember, dude, I go home and it sat with me all day. And these moments are seared in my brain like all the rest of them. I stand up and I look myself in this mirror and I look dead in my pupils and I say, Anthony, you're going to be great. And that was the moment, man. That was like, I got to do something. So you ask what I did. I asked, well, what does a great football player do? What does that person do? And so I crafted in my head this plan of like, I'm just going to go and do what they do, run routes and lift weights and that kind of stuff. And then I had to go do it when I didn't feel like it was me, the imposter syndrome, because I do things and you see guys, teammates like, what are you doing, man? You're still going to suck next year, right? The world comes at you. I just kept executing. And what it was the consistency compounded. And it got to the point where I wasn't just this guy that sucked trying to do what great athletes do. Dude, Jeff, internally, I was a great athlete. I was going to defend that with my blood, my sweat, my actions, every single practice and play. So when I came to school the next year for football, dude, you couldn't take it from me. Like, I am catching this ball. You are not catching it. I am making this tackle. You are not tackling me. I get to win this play every time because I earned it, because it's who I am. And I earned it in the dark. It's the best way to explain it. And I realized this one statement that I got to get tattooed somewhere. I'm seriously going to do it. And here's a statement that everybody should grasp, I think, when it comes to identity. It's what you create creates you. The process of going through the ugly, arduous consistency, executing past the pain, having a plan you trust, planning big in the first place, it's a creation process. Like when I'm like Michelangelo making the David, right? You don't finish that thing without having blisters and bad hands and messed up and then tell yourself, I'm a sculptor. I'm not some guy who sculpted a statue. I'm a sculptor. When I was done with that creation, I had always been creating the internal sense of who I was now through the pain, the fear, all that consistently. So when I showed up the next year, I was a monster. And that turned into going to varsity my sophomore year, a scholarship, NFL, and then so on.
What you create creates you. You heard somebody else make an excuse that was proxy for your excuse, right? 100%. And you're like, oh, that's dumb. Yeah. And it's so funny. So you do all this identity work with people. I mean, obviously, I assume you confront people's excuses very often.
Quickly. Oh, immediately. Yeah, we have processes where I do it, they do it, and we have somebody else in their life do it. It's a very unique little thing that they hate doing, but it's gold, bro. It is gold for the change.
Have you ever come across an excuse that wasn't, at some level, kind of a dumb excuse? Or essentially an excuse that was imbued with inappropriate significance by the creator of the excuse?
Yeah, I mean, it's a natural part of it. You know, I think people have to find ways to make an excuse that makes them feel better to go to sleep that night without like hating themselves.
Right.
So we'll make excuses that allow us to stay in the space of our alignment so we don't have to be faced with the fact that it sucks. And some of our crazy excuses, I have had people genuinely tell me when it comes like business, I'm like, you got to do video. Like part of your structure, you do video. Oh man, I can't do video. I'm not good. You know what? I'm going to wait until I'm good at video to do good video. Sorry, you're going to do what? I'm going to wait till I'm good at video to do video. How does that work? I seriously was like, how exactly are you going to get good on video without doing video? And so the logic is always skewed, or people will give me off the wall excuses and they'll try to confuse me. And then I ask this question. I say, great, here's what I want to find out. The person you want to be, right? Yeah. What do they have? They got car, money. Okay, cool. They got a good business. They're happy. They're giving back, thriving. Great. Okay. Would they have that excuse be good enough to stop them from doing their thing? And I sit and let them sit back and go, no. Because the reality is we're not just trying to get you to do something. We're trying to get you to think about when you become the human who does that, there's no longer a decision. It's just who you are. That's why success gets easy for certain people. I'm sure, Jeff, if I sat with you for a day, there are things you do that are so second nature to you that would stress me out the thought of doing them one time. And it's the same for everybody else in different aspects of the world. And people are wondering, hey, what book do I got to read? What course do I got to take? Like, you got to use what you got in your head already, but you aren't the person to use it yet, or you'd already have at least some shred of success. Mm-hmm. And when I get people to grasp that the difference is not what you know, but it's who you are with what you know, that simple question of what would that person do? It changes, it ratchets, like it makes certain things feel like, oh, like I tell people when they're like, oh, I'm so busy, my schedule's crazy. Okay, cool. Would Oprah look at your schedule and say it's crazy? And they go, oh, well, maybe not. Right? Okay, now.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
The reframe, right? It's a little reframe, but now they go, oh, all right, now how do we get efficient enough to get this stuff in so Oprah could go, oh, damn, you're killing it.
Yeah. That's a great frame. I love that. And you know, that's a really great way to have the right heroes is who am I trying to impress with what I'm actually doing in this world? Not who am I putting on a pedestal that makes me feel, you know, like I'm in the right place down here because they're up there. You know, so a lot of people kind of use hero or celebrity as like almost like a
I can't reach it thing.
Yeah. It's like the story, it's a fantasy, right? It belongs up there in the fantasy realm. It doesn't apply to little old me, but rather to actually try to connect to your heroes and be like, who is the hero that I'm trying to impress today?
Could be. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that a lot. So, okay. So biographical stuff, then you play in the NFL. You said only 3 years.
Yeah. I got hurt in my third. Yep.
What'd you hurt?
My left shoulder. I tore 2 of my 4 rotator cuff muscles. And then after that, man, I already torn the 3 in my right arm in college. So by that time, I'm a linebacker with a broken wrist, 2 bad shoulders, and low back issues, which are like the 3 areas that you do not do, whether you're playing linebacker. Those are like red flags. So after a while, man, no team would pick me up without a waiver. A waiver means if you get hurt with that, no one covers it. So my agent was like, dude, you can try, you can do it, but if you hurt your back or your wrist, you're screwed. Like, what if you go hurt your back and you can't get another job for the rest of your life and no one covers that? Yeah. You're screwed. So couldn't take that gamble for my family. Yeah.
Huh. Okay. So you're what, 20, like 25 something, mid-20s?
I think 26. Yeah, 25, 26. Yep. Yeah, I was 25 about 3 months before my 26th birthday.
So I gotta really try to empathize with that person. You're 25.
Yeah.
You kind of grew up lost, so to speak, and from an identity standpoint, a lot of kind of chaos. You find football. Football probably takes you through the next 10 years, high school to mid-20s. Yeah, now it's ripped away.
Gone.
And my guess in 3 years as an NFL linebacker, you probably made decent money. Like, you made good money, but it's like you're not like done. You're not like, I'm sweet, I'm going to go buy an island and just live out my days, right?
Not even close.
So you got to figure something out.
Yeah.
And the thing you hear about a lot of athletes is once athletics is ripped away, it's like they got nothing left or nothing else, nothing they're committed to. So yeah, how did that unfold for you? My guess is it was kind of hard.
Oh, very hard, man. I don't know, there is another way for it to be great unless you've played for a lot of years, but also even guys that have a good chunk of money, when you don't know why you're getting up each day, it makes it hard to get up each day. I get depression. At one point I was like, if this is my life after football, I'm cool. I don't want any of this. It just all fell apart, man. Cause I had some money, but I put into a gym business cause I had to find another reason to feel great about myself again. Who was I without football? I was nobody without football in my head. A way that I'll ache in this is to anybody who's had anything happen in life who's listening now, where you've had a relationship fall apart, a business, tank, maybe you lose someone in your life. What ends up happening, or you lose some money, right? I have this apple. Think of like an apple, and the apple is a fruit of your labor. You are this apple, and the apple falls off the tree and it hits the ground, and we feel like this fruit, right? And when something falls off the tree, we feel like we fell off the tree. Football, for me, I fell off the tree, and then for a little while, that fruit still got some, ability to be eaten. You can take it to the grocery store. I can eat it. It can go in your house. But at a certain point, that apple starts to get rotten. It gets brown. It gets decrepit. It dies. And that's how I felt. That apple. I felt, and we all do. We feel that way when it goes bad. And for a lot of my years, I was there, man. My marriage fell apart. My wife stepped out on me, we'll call it. Simple, clean way of making something that was really difficult happen. I was a bad dad. My business was always up and down. I was looking at bankruptcy 9 months into the business, dude. Like, I was out of shape. Everything that made me was kaput. The rotten apple had done its job. It was dead.
Yeah.
And then get to 2014, my mom passed away. My adoptive mom passes from MS. And I had this final spark of, I got to figure something out, man. This cannot be my life. Like, there's got to be more. And I started doing some work. And the best way I can explain it is having this realization of all of us who've had the apple fall off the tree. You were never the fruit. You were always the tree. Always. So I didn't realize that this fruit, when I looked at the fruit and I thought I was the fruit, well, I stopped tending to the roots of the tree and I stopped tending to the fruit. So all the rest of the fruit died. Of course, if football died in me, why am I going to take care of the tree and help my marriage be better, my parenting? And it all died. And when I realized that, man, the tree of Anthony created that fruit of football, created that relationship, created that, dude, I was like, all right, I got to figure out how to fix this tree, right? So I started giving nutrients to the roots. I started giving more life to the rest of the fruits. And in fact, at this point in my life, I believe I've created more abundance on that tree of my life with fruit than football ever could have given to me. And so that was a very difficult level. It was a good probably 5 years of fog, of crazy, of up and down. And I mean, nutso stuff, man. But at this point, I realized most people who are struggling with those moments, the dark, dark moments, it's a matter of they just focus on the fruit. They haven't looked at the tree. And if you could do that, you can do some great things with your life to create even better, brighter fruit for your world. So here's the thing I look at there. If you think about a tree, we just talked about the tree concept, but life has storms. Things come to blow us over. Business fails and you got to keep things stable. And so what I found is if you ever look at some of those pictures that have like an old tornado went through, there's one big tree between rubble,
Right.
How does that tree stand? Well, the tree stands because the tree has deep roots, and the deep roots eventually allow it to be able to thrive and do well. That fruit will produce fruits. That tree will produce fruits at some point. So what I realize is we got to have roots and fruits. The roots, in fact, are your faith, family, health, friends, and emotions. So do I have faith in self or a higher power, which is either one, you got to have a faith in something you don't believe. Family, do I have a good depth of really strong rooted family base? Do I have good friends, the family I choose? Do I have good health? My body can do things. Do I have emotional control in heightened moments? Do I go crazy? Am I capricious? How does that work? If these are all deep roots, and we label them 0 to 10, 0 is like, I don't got to control. It's not a good deep root. Or, I got a deep root in that area. When my roots are stable, I can produce fruits. I can feed the nutrients because I have a good faith, family, friends, health, and emotion. And so for me, most people, they lose sight of trying to make those roots deep. If my relationship is always in the rocks, no wonder my business didn't do well, right? I wasn't looking at taking care of what I had to do to make sure I had a good deep root in the marriage and the relationship in that area. And what's crazy, when those things are good, like for me, they're good now. My faith, I'm solid. My family is solid. My friends, I have great friends. My health is good. My emotional control, I believe, is very stable. I have weird conversations in the racial world now. I'm out public, people calling me bad words, and I'm like, whatever. I can control that, right? But here's what it does. It produces the ability to create fruits. Lots of fruit, right? So it's career. Do I have a career I love? Finances? Do I have money I love? Do I get an education from life every day? Do I get to escape and explore the world that I don't have in my backyard and go see it? And do I have a purpose? I call it lift, life inside for triumph. If my roots aren't good, I can't do any of this. I'll have a job that doesn't make me money. I'll have no money. I won't learn from life. I won't be able to take trips, or they'll ruin the trips, or I won't have a purpose. And so for me, when I look at how the two come together, people don't take a snapshot of where they're at and think about how they can improve these areas. Now, for me, the snapshot, it's just to see like the balance sheet of a business. Where are you at right now? Right? What's going on? And so what I'm looking at is like, when you do that, okay, take a look and take account of what's going on. And then if I'm able to, which I tell people to do, is just look at it every day. You think of one thing you can do in each area to improve by one depth or one fruit. You don't look at making it 10. It's unrealistic. You can't make them all 10s. And trying to do that gives you an added stress that overwhelms you. You shut down. So I tell people, just write down, what can I do to improve my relationship from a 6 to a 7? That's all you got to think about. Write on a piece of paper. And then you put them all down, and then every day look at it. It subconsciously triggers you to start thinking about these things in the middle of your day. So for example, if your relationship's on the rocks, like having that vision in my head when I'm going to get a break between podcasts or between calls, between meetings, as opposed to going and playing a phone game, I'm like, what my wife is doing. I'm going to give her a call. Send her some flowers, right? These little nuanced things that start subconsciously seeding in, and now they adjust. So the tree, essentially what I've done is I've said, hey, I'm going to go back and tend to the tree now. This is how I'm going to do it. There's a lot of ways tactically around that, but baseline, I tell people to go back and say, how do we make a better piece of fruit than that one that fell off? Because our marriage is not that old fruit. Our marriage is on that tree. It's a fat apple that it's waiting to fall, but it's not. It's still getting fed by the tree. It's not that dead fruit over there. And I don't want that dead fruit. We have something vastly different. So when I went back and said, screw that apple, let's create a new one in these ways by tending to the roots and fruits, it's made an amazing life so far.
Yeah, that's I'm glad I asked, man. I stepped into some fertile ground. What do you say to the person that is hearing all this identity, like, look, listen, man, I'm stuck in a job. I don't love the job, but there's no, I don't have any other prospects. I got all these, call them excuse. You'll tell me they're excuses, but whatever, bullshit. They're just my life and da-da-da. And so, and you're like, man, listen, the job's not the problem. The circumstances aren't the problem. Like there's some opportunity. There's an opportunity here to do some identity work, right? How do you connect to that person that's, man, they need to hear it, and man, they're dug in against it. Like, what's your strategy? It's
everybody, man. That's because nobody likes to hear that they have to improve. They want to hear an opportunity's there, right?
Right.
And even I frame it as like the opportunity is to access a new level of life that's waiting for you when you choose to do it. But here's what I've found to be the issue. We have these things called egos, and ego is EGO, everyone's greatest obstacle. stands in our way, man. It's and we protect it, because the thing is, our ego is designed to protect the identity with the actions. If I see myself as a great football player, my ego will protect that identity by getting up early and doing my lift and eating right and lifting weights and reading the playbook, right? Even if I don't want to do it. On top of that, if I happen to be, I don't know, a drug dealer, or I happen to be a drug addict, I'll protect that by saying, but you don't know how hard it is. You don't get it. I'm addicted, right? I'll find ways to protect it with the ego to be able to be in alignment. And so the first thing, obviously, it's a vast array right there. You'll have the people in between who I run into, who come into my work, and they're doing great things. Some of them are millionaires doing great things, right? But they have another level of something they want to achieve. And it's hard, because as long as the ego will protect where they're at, it won't let them have the opportunity to improve. So the first thing is, you kind of got to get to the point of, like AA will say, admit you got a problem, right? That's the first stage of it. It's not like it's magic, because you can't do anything if you don't give yourself permission to improve. And so the person right now listening, yes, you may not be a drug addict, but you might be addicted to the way of life you're living, which has allowed this life to be what it is. And that isn't always the greatest if you want something more. If you don't want anything more, dude, love it. Enjoy your life. I love you because you're happy. But the moment you're telling me you want something more, and you keep telling me that it's an outside reason, oh, the industry is this, and I don't have support, or I don't have the time, or whatever it is, you're just trying to protect the identity you have, because you don't quite grasp that until you give up that piece, you're not going to get the next piece of what you want. And so the person listening now, which is typically the person who I'm marketing to in the world of what I do, it's like, look, you have something you want. If you were the person to have it, quite logically and literally, you already have it by now.
Yeah. You
just would. And if you don't have it, there's things that I want that I don't have right now. I want to host a TV show. And I know the way that I'm running my life right now, because if I'm in season of dad, I'm not doing the things to do that. But I can admit that, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
The moment that you can get yourself to that space, you become malleable to the world, you'll do damn near anything. Because it's also, now you're not attached to a failure being an attack on who you are now. It's who you're trying to be. It doesn't diminish who you are. I'm taking a step in this direction to be this thing. And if I fail, cool. It was expected. I'm not that person. Let me try again and try again and try again. Let me create. And the creation process creates you. And then all of a sudden you stand up tall on that far side.
The most important insight in all the years that I have been involved in this arena of human behavior and high performance is that the decisions we make, and most of them are unconscious, really become our destiny. And I really wanted to know, what is the research? What are the things that we can really point to that we know for sure about how decisions are made, how are wise decisions that withstand the test of time? Where is that learned? And where in the brain does that actually occur? And we particularly as parents want our children to make really good decisions in their lifetime. One bad decision can change the trajectory of your life for a very, very long time, maybe for the rest of your life. And so this, my co-author was Dr. Sheila Olson, who has her PhD in behavioral genetics. We serve on a board together. We really wanted to think about this in the context of youth and parenting. And so we both dove into this and looked at the decision-making process under a microscope. And out of that, all the work that we did for quite a long time became this manuscript. So I think, I always think the latest book I've done is important, maybe the most important, but I'm really hopeful that this will strike a chord with people and get them to be more intentional about the power of choices and decisions they make for themselves and for their children. It's really the most important dimension of who we are as human beings, our ability to choose.
How do we simplify making huge decisions when huge decisions by definition have such massive implications? It can be hard to even, have a process for making them.
So it's a great question, Jeff. And it really was the cornerstone of what we were looking at in preparing this manuscript. It's so interesting. You'll make maybe 10 to 12 decisions in 10 or 15 minutes. Should I get up now or should I push the snooze alarm? Shall I have breakfast? Shall I skip it? Shall I go work out or I'm running late. I think I'll forget it today. Shall I have a quick breakfast or no breakfast at all?
How many of those decisions, or do you know, that we're actually conscious that we're making?
The majority of decisions we make are just automatic. There is a process. And so what we have tried to do is to use this, what I would refer to, and Sheila refers to as this conscious reflection, where we can reflect very consciously on the decision that we're about to make and extrapolate into what might be the consequences if I go this way or that way. The animal kingdom, except the human species, does not have that capability. And so what we want to make sure that we're doing when we're automating a decision, that it's not going to have really negative consequences. Even not having breakfast, and you're going to have a big meeting later on in the day, and you're starved, and you grab some Dunkin' Donuts on the way to work, and you're in a sugar high, then you go into a blood sugar funk, and you're trying to concentrate and focus. A little decision can have a profound impact because they feed on each other. And all of a sudden you have this cascade occurring that all started with a very simple decision, not to have breakfast or to not work out, and you normally do. So the issue is trying to help people understand how trajectories in life change almost instantly and almost innocently when you are in the process of either habitually making a choice you've always made or going in a new direction, or very intentionally saying, I really need a change here, and here is why, and then you persist with the decision. There are two parts to the decision. One is the decision to do something, to change directions, and then the other one is actually to do it. And they're both very hard, particularly when you're making a decision that involves a lot of new territory for you. And so you're going to be pushed outside your comfort zone. But when you've really reflected and what we call looking at it through a variety of lenses, the more you can see what the decision really means from a variety of perspectives, you tend to make better choices. And if you make decisions when you're angry, when you're upset, when you are very nervous, when we look back and we look at the research, a lot of our worst decisions were made when we were in a very, difficult time emotionally, mentally, even spiritually. We made very bad decisions because we were seeking comfort, immediate comfort, as opposed to long-term kind of alignment with what matters to us. And so it's a really interesting area for exploration. And I think it's the most important part of who we are as human beings.
How much of different decision-making can be strategies that we operationalize in the moment of the decision, as opposed to training that we have to do in advance of the decision for being emotionally capable of making decisions differently? And did that question even make sense?
Yeah, no, you raise a great point again, Jeff. There are two ways to make decisions. One is just to kind of do it automatically and trust your instincts and just kind of go with whatever this neural processor between your ears kicks out. And then there's another process that's much more intentional, and it's particularly important on choices or decisions that have real implications if you get it wrong. And should I quit my job and take another job with someone? Should I get a divorce? Should I buy that house and go into debt? Should I buy that car I really can't afford? What's so interesting when you look at the decision-making process is that the brain itself it exists for, most importantly, get you to survive, but it's also trying to get you what you want and need. And when you tell it, in a sense, you go, I really want that house. I really want that car. I really want that new job. I want to be more financially independent. I love that kind of money. So then you start working through all the possibilities involved, the positives, the negatives, and all that. It's so interesting that the brain is going to work very hard to get you what you want, even if you really shouldn't do it. It has the ability to kind of dupe itself, to hijack the brain so that you actually end up thinking this is the only choice that really I should make is the one that actually you wanted in the first place. The brain is so intriguing. There's some 25 ways the research world has identified that your brain can make junk up just to make you feel better and to get you what you want. And so it gets us into all kinds of interesting territory about even morality and whether this is right or wrong for me. We tend to push the envelope and we try to get away with as much as we can and still feel good about ourselves. When we pass that, we get in serious trouble. We start feeling guilty, and the brain kind of knows that if you really feel like you're kind of evil now because you're doing this, you then goes depression, hopelessness, and everything else. So the brain won't let you go there. It'll actually take you as far as you can to a decision that maybe, really isn't the best interest of you or your family or your future, but you still feel good about doing it. You haven't really cut too many corners, so you can still look at yourself and feel good about it. But the fact is that was a very bad decision, and you really didn't confront it in the way that actually is going to give you the long-term success. It's so interesting in the data. We learned that the most powerful impact in decision-making, how you learn to make decisions, it comes almost directly from observing people, mostly your parents, on how they made their decisions and how people who are important authority figures made theirs. So it's called a sensitive period in neurological development. When you're actually observing how your parents made decisions, particularly under stress, when they were angry, when they were furious, when they were how did they handle the emotion? How did they, when they were tired? What kind of decisions did they make? And how did those play out over time? Unfortunately, we tend to make decisions very similar unless we rise above it and use this reflective consciousness and go, I don't want to be like my father or my mother. I want to be something very different. I want to be a repository of better judgment, of better wisdom, of better choices, because they made maybe some terrible choices to drink too much, to drive too fast, to never take responsibility, to be very manipulative. And so it really gets us into some really interesting, deeply personal areas of how human beings actually navigate through life in this really kind of really interesting area of decision making. And I really encourage everyone to start looking at the number of decisions you make in a given hour, and what were you referencing when you made those decisions? What were those choices you made? And when you look back on your life, what were the decisions that you're so proud of? And what are the decisions you've made that actually cause you grief? You wonder, how did I ever make that decision? That was maybe the worst decision I could possibly make. And then go back and look at, well, what were the conditions? What were you feeling emotionally? Were you very lonely? Were you very upset? Were you struggling with a lot of insecurities financially or personally? What were the conditions that made for very, very bad decision-making? And that's really kind of what the essence of the book, Wise Decisions, is all about.
So I wonder, God, this is such fertile ground. So I'm thinking as you're talking, if we could sort of define the core, call it the core fallacies that undermine or underpin bad decision-making or undermine decision-making. And as you're talking, I was thinking, okay, One would be emotion, right? To be making decisions based on how we feel. And again, that's a broad stroke, but generally don't make a decision based on how you feel, or at least based only on how you feel. Second would be time horizon. By extending out the time horizon, by delaying gratification, by ultimately changing our relationship to the way we perceive and process time, we can generally probably improve our decision making. The third that came to mind was like modeling, that a lot of times, like you said, we've sort of learned to make decisions by observing other people, but if those people are not producing consistently the outcomes that we would want for ourselves, we probably shouldn't be modeling them in how we make decisions.
Exactly.
So those are three. I identified emotions, time, and modeling. How'd I do? And also, are there more that I'm missing?
Well, you really touched three important buttons there. That the first one is we've learned that health ignites better decisions. So the healthier you are physically, emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually, you tend to make better decisions. So if you're not healthy physically, you're not eating right, you're not taking care of yourself, you're tired, you're exhausted, you just really are in a bad physical state, it's much more difficult to rally the energy and to really look at all the alternatives and to fairly look at things. So emotionally, when you are not healthy emotionally, you want to avoid making big decisions when you are really in a bad situation in terms of how you feel, the emotions that are bubbling up. And we want to postpone decisions that are big, whether I should go to college, whether I should pay for my kids' tuition or not. Should we put a loan on the house so that they can go to college? And if you're in a really, really bad place emotionally, very vulnerable, angry, frustrated with them, the decisions you often make may have a tragic consequence in terms of how they play out later. So the healthier you get, physically, emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually, in terms of what really your values are, what do you want for yourself, what's the purpose of your life, those become really critical reference points for making decisions. So as you said, the modeling issue is really important to look at people that you really see have made a lot of great choices. And how have they done that? They probably were not out of control. They were just purely instinctive. And you don't want to just trust your gut. Your gut is a source of information. The brain is a brilliant neural processor that allows us to be pretty rational at times. We can look at facts, but human beings are not necessarily rational. We are emotional creatures, basically, that have the capacity to be rational. But you have to call that forward. We also have what, is kind of another, kind of intelligence in the system, and that's with your gut. But your gut is sometimes wrong. Your emotions are sometimes not 100%. But you want to look at all the different ways that you're coming to understand an issue before you really, and sometimes it may take, a week or a month, maybe even a full year to make the decision as to what is the right thing for you to do. And then other situations, you have to be immediate. You have to say, okay, I don't have a lot of time here. I've got to make a decision. I'm going to check all the boxes I can, which we outline in the book, before I make the decision, and then I'm going to run with it. So it's like you go into a restaurant and you have a menu in front of you, and you have some people can look at that menu and make the decision almost immediately. It's like, it's no problem. Then you have others that look at that menu and they wait for everyone else to order. And then they ask everyone, well, what do you think I should have? So they're having real difficulty making quick decisions. And sometimes you have to make very quick decisions. And so what we learned is that to make good decisions, you have to have a reference point. Something has to be, what are you referencing when you're making a decision or a choice? You're doing something there. Let's make that conscious. And so we tried to upload information into this neural processor that you go to before making important decisions. And so let's just say you're in a restaurant and you've already uploaded a number of qualifiers for making the decisions to what to eat. Low fat, no dairy, gluten-free, low fat. And all of a sudden you have your choice comes right out at you. And so that's this referencing point, which this magnificent brain of ours can do. We can actually look at these other qualifiers. This is how I want my life to go. Here's what I want to reference before I make a big decision. Maybe it says something like my best self, my highest values, my long-term, image of myself. I want to be more like this than that. And we have a whole formula for that. One of them is what I call the tombstone exercise. When you go and you actually reflect, how do you want to be remembered when you're gone? What do you want registered on that carved into your tombstone? And pick, 4 or 5 or 6 words or a sentence or two that actually becomes for you kind of the ultimate definition of a successful life. So let's look at the decision through that lens. And then you have this ability to be the best you've ever been. And you're really proud of who you are, particularly in a stressful situation. And that it's not a fantasy, but you show up sometimes like that. Let's vet that decision through that lens. So we have 7 lenses in the book that actually enable you to sit down, think of the decision you're about to make in the context of each of these lenses that you are uploading into this massive processing system that you have between your ears. And so now all of your decisions get vetted more carefully, as opposed to just being kind of off the cuff. Sometimes it's fine. Yeah, I'm going to go play tennis this afternoon, or I'm going to watch Netflix, for the next 2.5 hours. And you don't really have to think a lot about it, but there may be issues that need to be raised in making that decision, and that there might have been better alternatives that get you closer to where you want to end up. So we're complicated creatures, and the most important part of who we are is how we make our choices.
Is delayed gratification really the ultimate decision-making heuristic? And if so, how do we train for it? And if not, what do we train for?
So your ability to make decisions is learned. It's not something you're born with. You're actually either acquiring great habits of decision-making or poor ones. One of the really great predictors of how you're going to do in life is your ability to stave off immediate gratification, to actually see the bigger picture. And that's a neurological learning that has to take place. And if you're around people who are always satisfying their gratification immediately, if you're parents or you just around a lot of people that do that, it's probably very likely you're going to find yourself in a very similar situation. So what we want to do is to help people understand the massive importance of decision-making, and that we really have to train every day to become more intentional in how we make decisions, and to make sure that those that become habituated, that become automatic, are not just occurring out of just our life as we're living it, but we're automating things that actually help us fulfill what we believe is our best self, to be able to live the life and to be proud of who we are, and to really withstand the test of time for our children and for ourselves, how we're going to end up. So this is actually a call to literally put this in a context that maybe you never have before. What are you referencing? How good a decision maker are you? And how much better could you get? And let's all go into a training process here where every day we want to get better, because your life will reflect your choices and decisions. And if you don't really think that to be the case, I will tell you, all you have to do is go and look at all the people in your life who are kind of end up their tragedies, and look at the choices they end up making, whether it's in marriage or whether it's eating or drinking or whatever, in their health areas, in so many areas of their work, they can't handle the workload, so they end up doing things that actually really compromise their future or their family's future. So that this is really a deep calling to any reader or anyone who's listening to don't just take decision making as it just happens in life. Take control of it. So much of your life is going to be represented in those choices. And it could be anything as simple as pushing your snooze alarm one more time and sleeping in, or watching a late night movie and now you're waking up and you're not your best self with your children. You're actually angry, you're frustrated, your coworkers at your area of employment, you're not the same person. Your presentation wasn't as really persuasive as you wanted it to be. And you go back and you look at this cascade that occurred from one bad kind of faulty decision that you didn't vet thoroughly. So, we can't vet everything. It takes far too much energy. But we can, in fact, try to take control of those that become habituated. And some are really good, this habit of doing certain things. You don't need a lot of conscious thought, but there's some things this decision that I'm about to make could change a lot of things for me, for the people I care about, for my family. I'm not going to take it lightly, and I'm not making it now because I don't feel like I haven't done my homework yet. I'm going to thoroughly make sure this is the direction I go, and then I must hold myself accountable for that decision.
So I'm curious, how much in your work with decision making and helping people make better decisions, how much of it is oriented around how decisions are made or how decisions are informed, as opposed to, call it the softer stuff of like how we feel about ourselves or the reason why we would be inclined to make better decisions? And, where do you orient people in terms of the practical work they do?
So we're complicated creatures, and we need to bring all of our assets forward. And so, sometimes you're about to make a decision and there's a kind of a gut feel, this is a bad choice. I shouldn't be doing this. And you go ahead and do it anyway. And it plays itself out, and you go, it doesn't make me feel very good. That was dumb. I don't know why I did that. I don't know, that guy cut me off in traffic, and I just decided I was going to, get even. I was going to cut him off. And all of a sudden you got a road rage situation here. And as you're doing it, you're going, this is really stupid. I could kill myself or kill someone else. And you continue to follow this person down the highway, try to cut them off the way they cut you off. And that happens on many different levels, So again, the only hope we have is to rise above that situation and say, wait a minute, I have been working to try to contain the things inside of me that I believe, are not going to necessarily help me get to the best decision making. And I'm not going to do something spur of the moment just to get even. And so you have to work the territory, and you realize that I am capable of good decisions. And those decisions, I want you to be able to write them out. I want you to put them down on paper. What are the decisions that you made that you actually vetted very carefully and are proud of? And then you've also really taken, a lot of time, and you vetted it carefully. You thought you made the right decision, but you ended up marrying someone that you felt, oh, that was the worst decision. I didn't know it. I was blinded by my love and all the affection and everything, and I overlooked all those things, and now I realize I'm in a real mess here. But all we can do is to try to take what is sometimes purely automatic and instinctive and slow the train down and understand that if we're going to make a great decision, we need to check our heart. We need to check our capacity for logic. What are the facts here? What's really going on in the real world here? What is my gut saying? what are my values saying? What are the things that I most want about myself that make me feel good about myself? And you process this decision through that very, very kind of delicate sense of, really getting a reading on all these parts of you that are valuable. And then you make your decision. And then you can go back and say, I made a good decision or I made a bad decision, but I really was careful about it. And I didn't let my brain dupe me. I'm now calling myself out saying, wait a minute. I don't just want to be able to feel good about it because my brain has made up a lot of crap. It's called confirmation bias or the kangaroo effect or groupthink or whatever, that I actually am doing things that are not really aligned with who I want to be, but my brain says it's okay, so I don't feel guilty at all. That means your brain is hijacked, maybe the most important part of you, and there is a real serious flaw in our moral operating system. And I have spent a lot of time trying to understand how we end up making very bad decisions that are ethically and morally absolutely on the opposite pole of what we want, but we choose that because our brains have allowed us to do that because it's something we really wanted, and we buried the idea that this actually is going to incriminate you in some way, that you will not like the result, that if your brain actually takes you to that full on, you start feeling really guilty and bad about yourself. Your brain will protect you from that.
Do you have any data along those lines on what percentage of decisions and or what weight within decisions is coming from the brain simply disliking the state of not having made a decision?
I don't think there's any data that I have seen. We've looked at probably all the data that's out there. The data says pretty much the same thing, and that is our decisions, for the most part, are all automatic. We don't really think about our decisions that much. We just, I'm going to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. Yeah, yes, no. I'm going to vote this way. I'm not, not even think about it. So that is kind of how the brain, it's tried to habituate so that you don't have to use all of this energy for cognitive thinking and everything else. The brain just wants to make it easy for you. But unfortunately, a lot of those inputs need to be more carefully examined because they're faulty. And you don't want to actually just making a decision off the cuff. You don't have enough information. You haven't done your homework. You haven't actually looked at the reality of what's going on. Now you're making decisions and you're half blind. And now you get out there and go, why the hell did I do this? How can I end up making that decision? Well, you did it because your body was really trying to make it easy on you, just to make a quick decision without a lot of energy investment. It's called the conservation of energy bias, but we've got to fight that. Take the time, take the energy, really think it through carefully. And if you're not sure, wait. Unless you have to make a decision, then vet it through the lenses that you've already determined are most important for you, and then make the decision and then live with it and get better every time you make a decision, because you're going to be doing that until your last day.
He is on a mission to solve, I'll let him say it because I may say it wrong, but solve the world's biggest problem, I believe. And you can expand on that.
Yeah, I think the world's biggest problem is people don't believe in themselves enough. I say everybody's got Michael Jordan level talent at something. You're the greatest in the world at something. The best in the world at something. And it's probably not what your parents did, and it's probably not what you went to school for. And you have to first believe that you could be the world's greatest at something, and then with every ounce of your being, go off and chase it down. Whatever else you think is the world's greatest problem, cancer. Well, I think the woman who solves cancer could have already solved it 5 years ago, but she's a manager at an accounting firm and hates her life, right? And so, because she never believed in her ability to go to med school and to chase down that dream. So that's what I'm trying to unlock, and that's my mission for the rest of my life.
I agree with you, 100%. I agree with you. This is a huge challenge for people. But what do you think is actually the key to breaking through with people? Because it's a big fight.
So I have people in a spectrum of personal development, and the first stage are the complainers. This is the biggest part. The complainers don't think anything is possible. The complainers just focus on all the reasons why they can't win, or, yeah, that's great for you, Jeff, but, and then it's just totally closed-minded. Then I've got the dreamers who dream big ideas but never do anything. Then you got the Wannabes who I've kind of started and stopped and started and stopped. I might be the highest achieving in their circle. This is where excellence really comes in. Like, they're willing to listen to the excellence message because they're being told that they're great, but they know that they're actually not doing very much. And then you got the achievers and the high achievers. So in that first step of the complainers, the hardest thing I had to do to help start to break through, even just in my own mind, was recognizing that they need to be unburdened first. And it's a thing that we don't want to do, because in the world of excellence, it's like you have full accountability, full responsibility. Everything is your fault. Go make it, change it. But for somebody who right now is buried so deep and hates their life, they're not willing to hear that message. You're coming in way too hot. Like, you want them to climb Mount Everest, and they can climb. Like, millionaire isn't even excellent. Like, they could become a millionaire in the next year if they just listen to your advice. That's not even excellence yet. But for so many people, making $1 million is like the holy grail. That's impossible, right? And so that is excellent already, even though for you, that's step one. That's not even like, come on, guys. So, version of excellence, it's meeting people with compassion where they're at. And so in the complainer mode, when people are they might have tried something and didn't work, and now they refuse to try anything else. And worse than that, nobody around them is allowed to try either, because they don't want to look bad that they tried and failed. So they need to be unburdened. So the way that I had to wrap my head around this was, it's not your fault. So if I'm working with a complainer, I'm meeting them with compassion where they're at. It's not your fault. And that's hard language to hear, because every answer might be like, of course it's your fault.
That's like the opposite of extreme ownership. So it is.
But here's the thing. So like, how I flip it is, it's not your fault. And ultimately it becomes your responsibility. So it's not your fault where you're at. Another line that's great is, you did the best you could with what you had. And I want to ship people to, okay, but if you want a better life, it's possible. And it may not be your fault, but it's your responsibility to get there. And that's how I've made the own compromise in my own mind, because that's a difficult thing for even me to say, because I think everything is my fault. But somebody who's in that stage and they're already hating their life, you telling them that everything is your fault, they just don't want to listen to you. Like, there's Jeff, he's crazy, you're wired differently, I can't do that. And you're not. You're a normal dude who then chose to make an excellent life and then change his standards and built that life for himself, right? It's totally achievable. But if you look like you're superhuman and you're different and I'm not wired like you, then I'm not going to listen to you. And that's the hard part. And so for my message to get out there, I need to go down. I need to be able to talk to the people who are complaining and understand and have compassion for where they are, and slowly shift them to get them to the point where they would even understand a word like excellence, to then hand them off to someone like you to say, okay, let's go.
You're saying you actually have to change your message in order for it to land. And you have to reconcile almost like a compromise with yourself.
If you want to go down, if you want to go downstream, because if you're preaching excellence, I think once you're in wannabe stage, achiever stage, high achiever stage, at least in my model and how we work it, they're willing to listen to excellence. They're on the bandwagon of personal development. They want to learn from the best. They know they're capable of more. They know it's their responsibility to get there, and they would listen to Jeff Lerner about this. The complainers and the dreamers aren't there yet. Yeah. So they just think if you're some special alien and they can't be like you, even though you're exactly like them. You probably had it worse than them. So this is how my message is believe. I want to solve the world's biggest problem. So it's not enough for me to only work with those three groups. I need to go down. I need to be at the base level. I like dealing with complaints.
They need belief more than anyone.
I agree. So here's what I did. I went to all the people who I've helped in a really meaningful way. People I've mentored or invested into their business, where we had some friction at the beginning, where I was coming in too hot. Even though I felt like this was a baby step, like This is what we're freaking out over, right? And I asked them, what was you thought I was crazy. Now you've super valued the relationship. What made the shift for you to want to take me seriously and think that you could do it too? And it all came to some variation of my story. It's like, when you told me this story about you, I saw myself and you didn't seem to be so different. And that if you could get there, maybe you could teach me as well. And so I just collected what were the stories that I told? And so I went to enough people and found what their stories were with an intent to change my homepage. So if you look at my homepage, I went to Tony's homepage and I went to Brendan Burchard's homepage. And these are friends. I mean, not a deep, close friend, but I was at Brendan's house in Puerto Rico earlier this year. I've had Tony on the channel. So, I know these guys. You go to their homepage and what you see is people jumping and screaming and freaking out right on their homepage. For an achiever, it's like, yeah, sign me up for that party. For a complainer, it's like, that's a cult.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to that. What are they doing? He's brainwashed them. Mm-hmm. What has he done to them, right? Like people will, I don't know if you've ever been to any of those conferences, but Oh,
I've been to UPW. They literally, they tell you to stand up and jump up and raise the roof. Yeah.
So, but a lot of people, when they go home and they explain what happened, it's like, they think you're nuts.
Right.
Those are the complainers that you got to deal with. And so I naturally want to be in that. I love that. I love Tony. He invited me as a special guest to be in the front row and all that stuff there. But that's not a message. Tony doesn't hit the complainers. Tony hits the people who are, stage 3 and beyond, who want excellence, right? Or high achievement, he would probably say. So I, with intent, moved my message earlier to not show me and not show all the fancy things and not show off my place or who I've been with and all the celebrity pictures and all the news articles and all the awards, and went down to say, talking about how I'm a scared introvert and all of the problems that I had, to get to this point of where I'm at. And just recognizing that the thing that helped me was every step along the way, I tried to model success and try to find a mentor. And that's the only difference. Like I solved this problem by modeling success and finding a mentor. I just found the right plan, and you can do that too. And so it's shifting that message super early. I haven't fully taken it across all of my content, but my homepage is probably the best example of me trying to do that. Today I've been doing podcasts and hangouts and interviews all day, and as people are introducing me, what they're saying consistently is like, we love how vulnerable you are and how humble and authentic you are. And I don't think, honestly, if you talk to Brendan or Tony, they're actually very vulnerable and authentic themselves, but it doesn't come across in the marketing. The marketing is geared towards the achievers already. Right. That's a thin slice. And maybe they're fine with that too. I'm not, criticizing them, but my goal is to hit them earlier. And so, if I'm you, Jeff Lerner, sharing the story, it wouldn't be about meeting the president or advising these big people or whatever. It'd be, I was a broke jazz piano player and hated my life and wanted to quit, and like all the struggles, like take me through all the struggles you went through and then how you overcame them, and make it seem relatable that, if Jeff could do it, I could do it too.
Do you feel like there's a binary choice you're having to make to say, hey, I'm going to go have like this massive Mother Teresa type impact, and I may cost myself a lot of money in the process, but it's a human choice I want to make? Or do you feel like it's not as cut and dry as that?
I don't know that I've thought about it quite in those terms. I just think this is what I want to do. This is my mission.
Yeah.
And a different Evan Carmichael shows up depending on who I'm talking to. It's basically meeting people with compassion where they're at. The challenge is if you're doing a mass market stuff, like a website that anybody could be hitting, well, who do you target? I'm with intent trying to go earlier. But if you and I were to sit down and I could jam out about high achievement and excellence all day. That's my favorite. That's the best, right? I love that stuff. It was rewiring in my brain to say with belief that it's not your fault. Right? Because it just hurts me to say that when I think it through achiever lens, like that's not acceptable. It just would never say it. But that's what has to be said to help people get to the next step. I think it's actually the holy grail of personal development, because people don't, Tony could shift somebody. If somebody believed in Tony, he could shift somebody in the moment super quick. It's the people who write him off. I mean, at my first UPW, the couple next to me, the guy fell asleep. I mean, he paid $1,500 to be here, and his wife probably brought him along, and she was doing the thing, and he passed out and eventually left. And he paid $1,500 for that ticket. So, there's still most people, I think, to the outside world, to the people who hate their life, like Tony just represents, or anybody in personal development just represents the best version of you. You're angry at Tony without knowing him because you hate your own life, because it's easier to be upset at somebody else and call him a guru or a cult instead of you actually making the change in your life and trying to learn to get better, right? You don't even have to love everything about Tony. If you take one thing from Tony or Jeff or Evan to make your life better, that's enough, right? The goal isn't to be the next Tony Robbins or the next Jeff Lerner. It's to be the best you. But people don't think that way by default. We weren't, like, who taught you that? It wasn't your parents, typically. Like, most parents hate their lives too. And so the kids hate their lives as well. Like, we're not taught this stuff. So that's part of what I want to try to do is ease the burden, make it easier to get in, to take that first step. Because for most people, like, the path to excellence is taking the first step. People aren't willing to, the biggest thing missing, they have all this potential that you could go and see. And this is where I get frustrated. You have so much potential. You could do all these great things. Why aren't you just doing, here's the tools. You can be a millionaire by next year. Go do it. They just don't have momentum because of the lack of belief. And so that's what and I haven't figured that out by any stretch. But Russell Brunson, who started ClickFunnels, was very kind of helpful in that. It's like, you have to unburden people from their past, because if they come in talking to carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders and all their past, most people live in their past mistakes and regrets and all the pain and struggle that they've been through, and already feeling like a failure, already feeling judged by the world, that they don't want any more of that. So you have to lift that off their shoulders before they're willing to listen to anything that you have to say. So that's why if I'm talking to one of the entrepreneurs I've invested in or high achievers, like, no, you got to raise your standards. Like, that, you call that your best? Come on, let's go. Like, this is nothing close to, right? That's achiever talking. But to the very opening, first person complainer, hater, it's having super patience. That even them just showing up on time for the call is a big win, which, like, be unacceptable. Like, unacceptable in a you're late by a minute, I'm out of here, right? For entrepreneurs I've invested into, if you're late by a minute, I'm gone. Standards, it's not even for my time. You don't value your own calendar, right? But for somebody else, for somebody who I'm first meeting first, I might wait 10, 15 minutes, which I would never do, because they hate their life so much. Like, you haven't taught them the lesson. Right? They just think you're more of a jackass for standing them up. Even though they were 15 minutes late. Right? So it's empathy and meeting them where they're at. It's super hard. I mean, at least for me, it's been super hard. Maybe for others it's easier. But
what a interesting developmental challenge you've given yourself. Yeah.
How to deal with the complainers. But it's a deep passion of mine. Like, I like to say that, give me your hardest case, and I'll take them and I'll help them just by being around me. And even, like, I couldn't say that. I could say that to you, but I couldn't say that to a normal human, because that's so egotistical. What are you talking about? Just because you're there, you're going to change them? Yeah, absolutely. Right? So people gravitate to my content. The achievers, if they look at my homepage, get confused. Like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. But then when we get on a podcast or a call or something, it's the achiever Evan kind of comes out. It's like, come on, what are we doing? Like, we're moving too slow. Let's go.
Hey there, it's Jeff. So real quick, I want to let you know about my text message community. I use text messages to provide unique value to the Unlock Your Potential community. These texts could just be random thoughts. It could be letting you be the first to know about an event I'm planning, maybe giving an update on a special I'm running or some free training that I host for my community. Anyway, just shoot me a text to get subscribed to the list. The number is 702-996-3926. Again, that is 702-996-3926. Let's get back to the podcast.
Can you just maybe share as a context for everyone, like your work? What is the basic work that you do and kind of the message that you exist in the world to share?
Yeah. So the basic difference between standard economics and behavioral economics is that, as you said, in standard economics, people assume that people are perfect. We take all options into consideration. We think about the long term. We compute everything. And we always make the right decision. In behavioral economics, people say, not so fast. Let's just, instead of assuming those things, let's just put people in different conditions. Let's see how they behave. And we all know how people behave, right? People don't sleep enough, and we don't take our medication, and we don't exercise, and we overeat, and we text and drive. and we argue about whether the toilet seat is up or down, and you name it. And this realization that the standard economic model, the rational one, is interesting and so on, but we're very different than that. And my first book was called Predictably Irrational, to make the point that we're not random. It's not that we make mistakes as random, but we make systematic deviations. For example, we're all tempted to text and drive while it's very dangerous. We all tempted to check our phone late at night and stay awake too much. So now, with this realization that people are predictably irrational, there's also the question of what do we do about it? And we don't want just to give up and say, okay, people make mistakes. We also want to think about how do we design the world for people who are irrational. So, for example, if you say, how would you design, food for people who are irrational? You wouldn't design buffets, for example.
Right.
How would we design phones for people who are tempted too much? So we don't stop at just describing it. We also kind of say, how do we fix it? And by the way, that's also a really good link for entrepreneurship, because you basically say, where are opportunities to fix the world? As a behavioral economist, you walk around the world, you say, let me look at mistakes. Let me look at mistakes that people do in their romantic life. Let me look at mistakes that people do when we teach kids. Let me look at mistakes everywhere. In fact, in everything you look, usually I start by saying, let's assume that people don't know what they're doing in this domain. Even though, I'm 56, I've been sleeping for many years, right? I have lots of hours of sleep. You could say, I should be a sleep expert. Say, what if I'm an amateur? The truth is I'm an amateur. But you say, what if people don't know how to spend their money to maximize their happiness? And what if people don't know how to sleep? And then you say, and if we understand human nature, we can also think about how do we fix it? How do we make things better? So that's basically the agenda.
So after I read Freakonomics, I remember I was on vacation. I want to say I was in Laguna Beach. I have the picture in my mind. I'm pretty sure it was Laguna Beach, California. And I remember I went out on the patio of the Airbnb or whatever, wherever we were staying. It was some beach house. And I remember having a really profound feeling of like, I think behavioral economics might be the most important thing in the world to study, because it's exactly like if economic, like, because I actually think economics, I mean, I always remember George Bush, the first one, when he ran for president. I think it was him going, it's the economy, stupid. It's the economy. Like, that is what everybody's basically keying off of, for better or for worse, in terms of overall quality of life, if we want to be reductive and make it about one thing. And then behavioral economics is how human beings interact with their own set of economic possibilities. If we crack that, I mean, I guess we still have to solve for like love and health and, some other things. But I mean, we've got a long way towards human fulfillment if we solve behavioral economic questions. So go ahead.
Let me just say that on the two grounds that we talked about, is the first is that we are truly fascinating. Think about something like placebos. The fact that you can take a pill with nothing in it, people would tell you it's a painkiller, you would believe them, and it would actually act to reduce your pain. That's just amazing. It's true, that's how it works. But we are fascinating. The way that the human mind works is just fascinating. So that's the first part, is that we're really fascinating. Like, people think that, the fascinating things are the stars and molecular biology, and they're correct. These are fascinating things. But, what's happening here is unbelievably fascinating. But the second thing that is even more important is that we can get ourselves out of trouble. We could make less mistakes. We could live better lives. So, for example, one of the big projects I'm working on now is to try and think about the last chapter of people's lives. Think about the point from when people get a diagnosis of a terminal illness until people pass away. On average, this is slightly longer than 5 years. Thanks to medical science, This is it's a long journey. And I am starting to ask the question of what are the mistakes people make in this journey, and could we get people to make less mistakes? And the reality is that there are many mistakes. We can go into that, but I think that there is a possibility that the last chapter of people's lives will be one of their best chapters. I'm not talking about the last 3 weeks, but last 5 years, if people get the right focus and they start fixing relationships and think about legacy and finding time to do things that they haven't found before, there's a lot of opportunities in this chapter. Of course, we don't do it right now. So if you think about where we are, human being, and where is our potential to live fulfilled life, that gap, I think a lot of it could be improved with a better understanding of social science, behavioral economics.
Why are we teaching kids to operate in a world that no longer exists, and why haven't we done something about it?
Okay, so lots to say about this topic. So the first thing, of course, is what you said, is that the education system was designed a long time ago. And it was designed for a different world. It was designed for a world where learning to read and write and learning some math was the skills that people needed to get a desk job. We've way past that, but the system is stuck. One of the principles in behavioral economics is that change is very tough. But every time we want people to change, and it's very tough. And we call this the default option. Right, so the classic example for this is organ donation. There are some countries where the organ donation form says, check the box below if you want to donate your organs, and almost nobody does. And there are other countries that says, check the box below if you don't want to donate your organs. And again, nobody checks the organ, but now they all donate. And you get a huge difference, but it's nothing to do with preferences. It's about what's easy. If it's easier to donate, people donate. It's easy not to donate, people don't donate. In a much more mundane example in the US, when people go to a new job, they have a percentage they can put into retirement in the 401k. Depending on what the default is, that's what people donate. Not donate, that's what people save for retirement. When you ask them later, why did you choose what you choose? Nobody said, oh, this was the default. But it was the default. So we follow what we call the path of least resistance. And the reality is that doing anything that is different from what we've done before is just very, very tough. So we end up doing the same thing over and over and over. And when we talk not about the person, but when we talk about the system, it's even tougher. It's even tougher. By the way, I'm here with my laptop. This keyboard arrangement, the QWERTY keyboard. You know the story about that, right? It's called.
I don't, but I'm sure there is one.
So it's called the QWERTY keyboard because that's the letters on the top left, right? UW and so on. This keyboard layout was invented in the days of the typewriter, and it was invented to slow down typing. It used to be that when people typed on a typewriter, these little hammers would bang into each other.
Oh,
so
right.
So they created a keyboard layout that was designed to slow us down. Now, by now, we don't have these hammers. Nothing should slow us down. But think about how difficult it would be. There's a different system called Dvorak. There's a few other ones, but imagine how difficult it is to change, right? It's a system that makes, by design, everybody type slower than they would otherwise. And just think about how many hours, minutes, hours, days, years, millennia are lost just because we have this system. So systems have a tendency to maintain themselves. The upside and the downside, we don't see them in equal terms. Right.
And that's a cognitive fallacy of humans, basically, right?
It's a little bit yes and it's a little bit no. So we call this loss aversion. And imagine I came to you with a bet, and I say, here's a coin. If you flip it and it comes on head, I'll give you $120. If it comes on tail, I'll take away from you 100. So plus 120 minus 100. The expected value is positive. You should play it, but most people don't play it. And they don't play it because they say, look, if I'll win $120, I'll be a little happy. But if I lose $100, I'll be really sad. So let's not do it. And the evolutionary logic is that if you're in the jungle, like think about, ancient time, you're an animal in the jungle. If something bad happened, you can get eaten and it's over. If something good happened, maybe you get to live another day or another 2 days. But there's a huge asymmetry among those things. But anyway, putting that aside, the realization is that when we come to look at risk, we usually look at risk one step at a time. Should I take this risk or this risk or this risk? So there is this story that Samuelson told, and the story is that he comes to his colleague and he give him the same bet I gave you, plus 120 minus 100, and his friend said, I'm not playing. And Samuelson said, what about if you played it 1,000 times? And the friend said, no, of course I want to play it. So Samuelson comes to him and he said, look, here's what you're telling me. You're telling me that if I came to you every day for 3 years, for 1,000 days, I came to you every day, and every day I said, would you like to take this bet? Every day you would say no. But if I say, would you like to take it 1,000 times? You would say absolutely yes. And this is the question of whether we look at each risk one at a time or whether we look at life as a portfolio. And I think that one of the things we need to do is to stop thinking about each risk by itself, because if we think about each risk by itself and the downside of that risk, there'll be many risks we will not take. But if we think about how do we want to live our lives? I have 40 more years to live. How do I want to run it? What kind of risk level do I want to take? Yes, if I take risk, there's upside and there's downside. But what do I want to do as a portfolio? And under those things, under that line or mindset, I think people do take more risk when we think about it as a portfolio. And when you think as an entrepreneurship, in an entrepreneurial way, one approach is to say, it's not all or none. Start small, have a side business. It's not all or nothing. Test the water. Sorry for this. Do you know the research on being lucky?
No, talk to me, please.
Okay. So there's research that shows that some people are luckier than others.
Like actually.
Well, now what does it mean to be lucky? Yeah, I'm very lucky, by the way. I'm very lucky. Now, what does it mean to be lucky?
Well, the saying is opportunity plus preparation equals luck.
Yes. So some of it is correct. So the first thing about luck is about just trying more things. Imagine two basketball players. One of them waits until they have 100% and they shoot twice in a game. The other one shoots when they have 50% chance and they shoot 40 times and they have 20 baskets. But life is mostly not just baskets. Baskets is binary. Yes, in or out, yes or no. Opportunities in life usually takes much longer to mature. So you start lots of things, you see what works and what doesn't work, you continue with the things that work, and you stop wasting time on the things that don't work. And it ends up, this is what luck is about. Luck is about trying lots of things, even things that are far-fetched, but as a portfolio. Seeing what works, what doesn't work, stop wasting time on the things that don't work, and push the things that do work. And I'll give you two examples from my own life. So I'm a professor, I teach at the university, I do some research, I write some books, but during COVID, I decided to try and write a kid's book. Don't know much about writing kids' book, but I decided to try it. And I decided to try and write a drama series for television, loosely based on my life. And, both of them are low, odd events, but both of them end up working out. So I'm actually in 10 days, I'm flying to Vancouver for the last day of filming of the TV show. It's on NBC and it's called The Irrational. And it's about the life of a professor who is also burned, has scars on the right side of their face, and does research and helps the FBI. And the kids' book is going well. I found an illustrator and it's going well. Two things way out of my domain, but just trying out. Take this idea of taking risk and having a portfolio. I think are very important, and stop wasting time on things that don't work. These, I think, are the big keys.
Yeah, I love this. I'm always thinking from each episode, it's kind of like what's my core takeaway, right? By the time I've done hundreds of these, it's not like I'll be lucky if I remember one thing from each episode. I'm feeling like this one, it could end up being this concept of a portfolio approach to life. Mm-hmm. And so, if you could just shift the odds slightly in your favor, then you can win simply by placing more bets.
That's right.
That's right. I really like that. So go ahead. Yeah, please.
Let me try and give you one more point. Let's see if you can remember two from this one. I'll come back to in a year and check. So I obviously have this strange look with this half a beard.
Which I was going to ask you about, especially since you brought up a TV show based on your life. But
so this half a beard has a couple of reasons. The first one is I was badly burned. Most of my body is covered with scars, including this side of my face. So there's just no hair on this side. Mm-hmm. But of course, I could half shave, and it would be less striking in this lack of symmetry. And for many years, I shaved. And when I shaved, I looked less strange. But then a few years ago, I went on a month-long hike. And during that month-long hike, I didn't shave. Then I came out sort of like this. And I didn't like this look. The first time I looked in the mirror, I didn't like the look, and I was going to shave it. But I said, I'll keep it for a few weeks, just for the fun and memory of the hike. And during those few weeks, to my surprise, I got a few messages from people who thanked me for the half a beard. Now, why did they thank me for the half a beard? These were people who were struggling with their own injuries. They were feeling that they were hiding something, and they said the fact that I was so much out there with my injury, so much saying I don't care, gave them a bit more courage to not hide their own injuries. I said, if I help somebody else, maybe let me keep this half a beard. But the real strange thing happened about 4 months later, where 4 months later I felt that I was in a better place with my own injury. I felt I was looking at my scars not as more like a part of the story of my life. Some people do tattoos. I have these scars. Yes, my hands are not so good. I don't have much movement. I have lots of deformities and challenges. But I was more at peace with all of this. Like, it's okay, it's just part of me. And I thought to myself, why now? I'm 56. I got injured, over 35 years ago. Why now? And here is what I think happened. Like, think about somebody like me that shaves. I wake up in the morning, this side is smooth, this side is stubble. I half shave. At the end of the day, it's more symmetrical. In fact, the process of shaving for me is also a process of hiding. It's also a process of becoming less non-symmetrical. I became less non-symmetrical after shaving than I was before shaving. And letting go of that and just accepting my, bizarre look was actually very healing. Now, it's not always fun. Kids point, people ask, all kind of things happen. But it was very healing. It was very healing to basically kind of go through this exercise of self-acceptance. Now, what do I hope that you remember for this? For me, the big topic about this is that here I am, a social scientist. I'm supposed to know these things, but I didn't. I could predict how day number 1 would feel like with half a beard. Not so good. But I don't have any tools to predict month 4. And for me, this is a bigger point about the fact that we are really bad in predicting the long-term consequences of different actions. How happy would I be if I did X? Very hard to tell. How miserable would I do? I can predict tomorrow. Very hard to predict the long term. And that also adds to the portfolio discussion, because it says that the risk we take, partially we need to take it because we're not good predictors of what will be good for us. If we accept that we're fallible, if we say, you know what, I'm not sure what job would work for me. I don't know what role I would be happy with. I don't know what, all of those things. It basically said we just need to try, because if we don't try, we'll never learn. It's not enough. Like, we can't sit in our desk and reason our way through it. Some things we just need to try, and only with trying we would get a sense of what really works for us and doesn't work for us.
There's some set of things that you should learn where you can essentially, what I call, skip the line so that you could be in the top 1 to 5% of your field, which is very hard, but not as hard as people think. Like, it's hard to be the best in the world at something. It's not hard to be in the top 1% at something. And so I always try to figure out, how can I be in the top 1%? And the benefits of being in the top 1% of a field is that gives you an invitation to join the subculture of that field. Like, I don't have to be the best ping pong player in the world, for instance, to go into a ping pong club. And if I'm in the top 1% in the world, people are going to recognize it. I'll meet the local coach and have some fun games, and people want to play me, and I'm always welcome back at the club. If I'm in the top in the world, that's a different story. That's really hard. That's, there's a 7 billion people, 10 people get to be in the top 10 in the world. But if 70 million people play ping pong, I'm just making ping pong up. 70 million people are in the, if 700 million people play ping pong, 7 million people are in the top 1%. You can be one of those 7 million.
Yeah, that's a really, can I just incubate that point for a minute? It's not as hard as people think to be in the top 1%. I think that is actually a revelation for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is, it's an amazing thing to be in the top 1% of anything. And like I said, you become part of the subculture of that activity. It also feels good to master something. Being in the top 5% of anything means you're a master of that thing. It's like a black belt, is not in the best in the world. It's in the top 1% of whatever martial art they're a black belt in. They're 1 in 20. And so it feels good to master something. You master a discipline, you master a mindset, you get better physically, mentally, whatever it is, creatively, whatever it is that you're trying to master. It feels good to be better. It feels good to have a community. It feels good to be able to give back, because if you're in the top 1% of something, chances are you could start teaching it. And all of these things are the benefits.
Well, and I feel like a lot of the beauty of a thing opens up to you once you have enough competence to get into that top 1%. That's where all the fine detail starts to become relevant and meaningful. And that, to me, that's the beauty in things. Like, in music, 95% of what I appreciate about music, the 99% wouldn't even understand.
Yeah. And that's really, it's funny you mentioned that. So when I was 17 years old, I was starting to play chess, and I was starting to get obsessed with it, but I had never really played it before. And I remember I took a lesson from a guy who was very strong, and he's what's called an international master, which is a higher rank than master. And I was talking to the janitor in my school about this, and the janitor in my school played chess. And, he was an amateur player, and he was playing, and we were playing together. And I told him, I took a lesson from this guy. And he said, that guy must be very happy. And I said, why do you think? And he said, well, for the rest of his life, he's able to enjoy this game, like the nuances of it, like you just said. And you're right. Once you're in the top 1% of something, you see so much more than when you were just casually, observing it as a path. And, this is kind of true about being alive. Like, let's say you're an accountant. People think accounting is boring. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if you're a bad accountant, and by the way, most accountants are not in the top 5%, they're in the bottom 95%. And so they're not that good. So if you're a bad or a mediocre accountant, it's not your fault necessarily. You might just not be interested in it. But then when you're doing your job, and you're talking to people about their tax issues, and you're helping people set up their trusts or whatever, in those moments, you're not fully alive because you're just going through these robotic is the opposite of being alive. You're going through these robotic motions, and you feel okay with it because that's what you've been doing. But again, because you're not seeing the subtleties and the nuances where every experience offers up new, exciting material and information, because you're not obsessed with it, because you're not in the top 1%, you miss out on the real value of being alive, which is having every experience deliver new, joy to you. And it's odd making that analogy using an accounting example, but I think it's true for every experience we have. Like if you don't love doing something, and if you're not either in that top 1% or striving to be the best you can be at whatever it is you love doing, you're not going to feel fully alive in the short amount of time we're alive. It all boils down to, like, when you play the piano, let's say you're improvising, someone said, hey, can you improv around, I don't know, what's a movie theme? The movie theme for Star Wars.
Out of Africa. Let's go with
Out
that.
of Africa.
One of my faves.
And make it like a little jazzy. Okay,
Right.
Now you have in your head thousands of patterns that are like jazzy kind of patterns with different chords. With this set of chords, I've seen this 1,000 times. So I'll play around with this a little bit. Maybe I'll come up with something new. Like I'll throw in jazzy mixed with a little bit of kind of an African drum kind of sound. And these patterns, so you can mix them and you know how to mix them well. But let's say you only knew 10 patterns and not thousands. You wouldn't have as much fun. It wouldn't be as enjoyable. Now, it might be if you were using this as an exercise to develop more patterns, but it's through your mastery that you're able to now find exponentially more ways to enjoy a particular activity.
Yeah. So it is, it is a pretty existential and to some degree pointless question, because you would need 2 lifetimes to answer it. But like, which is the better path? Call it mastery to the level of richness of experience in a variety of things, or mastery to the level of perhaps more richness of experience in fewer or just a singular thing. Like, who knows? But I know they're both better than like no mastery at anything, which sadly is a lot of lives. But
it's very interesting because for a long time I would have said, hey, it would be best to be number one in the world at something, and that might be true. Like being number one on the planet at something that other people highly esteem and that you love could be very fascinating. I don't know what that's like, but you probably at a young age, you travel all over the world, you get a lot of, you meet many interesting people, you have many interesting experiences. But I was talking to Tyler Cohen, who just wrote a book called Talent, and he's an economist I think he lives in DC, and he has a great blog, great podcast. And I asked him, and he also is a chess player. We're about probably the similar level. And I asked him, well, wouldn't it be great to be in the top 10 or the top 20 in the world at something? And he said, absolutely not. Like, look at the person who's number 15 in chess. And we named the name, the person who was. And he said, that guy is an absolute failure to reach that level, but still not be able to hit number one. A, he's not making a lot of money. B, compared to number one or number three or whatever. B, he's probably not very happy because he loses all the time to number one.
Right.
And so
in his whole life, like his whole life is just as focused on chess as the number one guy, probably. It's not like he's got a lot of free time.
Right. He's probably even working harder than number one because number one is so talented. He doesn't have to work as hard as number 15. And he doesn't know how to be a stand-up comedian or write a book or, run a business or these other things. So I'm starting to think variety, set goals for yourself and celebrate those goals. So celebrate being, celebrate improvement. Don't necessarily celebrate being number X or top 1% or whatever, but celebrate your improvement and quantify those with small goals. And and I don't say this in a cliche way, this is what I have to do because I'm always depressed if I'm not number one immediately. But, you know, if you acknowledge improvement and celebrate those, it's a great experience. And then celebrate the fact that, hey, I could have a conversation with someone, and when they bring up comedy, I could talk about it. When they bring up economics, I could talk about it. When they bring up, you know, some business that I'm involved with, I could talk about that industry. Or, you know, you and I both have a podcast. We're able to indulge in many different topics and become conversational in them. It's good to be in the top 1% of interviewing, because then you get a lot of information from the people you interview and absorb that information and then be able to, you know, spread it out later.
You kind of got to take it to the extreme to get great at anything. So, let's talk about that. The point where maybe it's the point of diminishing returns inside of obsession is what we're really talking about. Because ultimately the goal here is to help people be happy and successful, and really successful is only successful insofar as it's part of being happy and fulfilled anyway. And then like not dying of starvation. Right. So let's take Jan Duda, and who I know nothing about, by the way, except that he has a 15 by his name, and Magnus Carlsen, who I'm sure you're quite familiar with, who's got a number 1 by his name. And like, what do you feel like is that distinction? Is it? Yeah. I mean, contextualize that distinction for me. And then let's try to sort of like weigh it in terms of life satisfaction.
Yeah. It's a really interesting question because, and this is why Tyler Cohen and I were talking about this, because he wrote a book called Talent. And so at that level, they're all extremely talented. Like they all have some innate thing. We don't know what it is, some magic fairy dust that makes them great at what they do that other people don't have. And, you know, to get in the top 1% as opposed to the top 10 in the world, you need to know that it's good to know as much as possible, but there's shortcuts. Like we were talking about, if you, study, if you were learning a foreign language and you know the 500 most popular words, you could probably get by speaking that language. So you could be in the top 1% of foreign speakers of that language. But to really speak fluently like a native speaker, you kind of have to know everything. And, you know, there's no, like when I'm studying chess, I'll focus on, if I get better at this, my overall game would improve. That's not true for these guys. They have to get better every day at everything. They have to be the best. There's no shortcut. They have to be great at everything. If you're a tennis player, you can't say, hopefully nobody will realize my backhand is not so good and they won't hit it there, so I'm just going to focus on my forehand. Everyone's going to hit to your backhand. Once they see, you know, at that level, they see your weaknesses easily, they'll just hit to your backhand and you're not going to be a good player. So Jan Duda and Magnus Carlsen, they have to know everything. And what Magnus Carlsen has is, he has an ability and a motivation to really learn everything. He never gets bored of the game. He never slows down. His memory, in terms of talent, his memory is perfect. You could show him a position and he'll say, and wasn't that from 1957? You know, Boris Spassky won the under 12 Moscow tournament, and with this game in round 3, like he has an amazing memory, and he has studied every aspect of the game. He's by far the best player. Maybe he'll be the best player ever. Who knows? But you know, every area continues to improve. But it's even hard to imagine who's ever going to be actually better than him. And Duda plays amazing. He would beat me 100 times out of 100 times. And he likes to play his games a little extra wild or attacks a little bit much. He doesn't play maybe he's not as much of a machine as Magnus Carlsen is. So it's hard to say, but because I asked this question too, there's some level by which they just didn't really want to learn everything in some small nuanced area of the game.
Well, is it potentially that there's even an area of self that they didn't want to go, where maybe it's not even a chess specific aptitude or nuance? It's maybe almost like what amount of work would I have to do to be as disciplined as Magnus Carlsen or as vicious as Magnus Carlsen? You know, it's almost like character based, not talent.
I totally think you're right. Like in the last world championship, this is very interesting because it's like how to be a world champion. So Magnus Carlsen was playing against this very great player. Obviously, he was the challenger for the world championship. He's the number 2 player in the world. His name's Jan Nepomniachtchi. So people call him Nepo. And Nepo, who's an amazing attacking player, to watch his games is like a work of art. But against Magnus Carlsen, he made these trivial blunders, like a move someone even ranked lower than me would make occasionally. And people in the press conference afterwards asked him, why did you make that move? And he just shrugged his shoulders and said, you know, I don't know. I'm going to spend a good deal of time after this match. Me and my team will be trying to figure it out. Like, and I like the fact that he included his team. Like he's going to be working at figuring out what he doesn't play that poorly. He should have seen those moves in seconds and microseconds. It should have been instinct and something psychological in him. Like maybe he was nervous, maybe he was overconfident. I'll give you an example from me that was very frustrating. So I mentioned it earlier maybe, or I mentioned it when we were talking before. I stopped playing in tournaments when I hit the master title in chess. I was New Jersey's junior champion at the age of 18. I played a few more years and then I stopped playing in tournaments. And I stopped playing for 25 years and I just restarted again. Everyone told me, you can't possibly restart at the age of 54 and be good. And you're never going to get as good as you were before. And you're certainly not going to get better. And I'm convinced, of course, that I will be. And
by the way, you're not devoting yourself to it full time. Like you still have a career and businesses and family and life. And
oh yeah. But to your point about obsession, even today with COVID, I woke up at 5 a.m. and I spent the first 4 hours of the day studying chess.
Okay.
So that's what I do every day.
That success clue right there, everyone, by the way, know, from James. Thank you.
Success or misery, depending on what happens. But
sixes, man, those are sixes.
So the last tournament I played in, I started off amazing. It was like I played and beat the 2 highest ranking players I'd ever beaten in my life. Even when I was younger and now, I destroyed these first 2. And then the third game, I was playing the number 43 ranking player in the world, a very talented prodigy. And I was beating him. And the reason I know is, you know, later on I looked at the computer and throughout most of the game I was winning. And then I even had a winning move, which I could have seen. It wasn't beyond my abilities to see it, where I could have won that game. And then even in the 4th game, I was playing the U.S. Women's Champion or the former U.S. Women's Champion. And she was like, why didn't you just make the obvious move here and win? But I wanted to, I didn't do it. I even had seen the move she was pointing out. And so what happened was I won those first 2 games, again, proving to myself I could beat people higher rated than I've ever beaten before. So I was on my way to being better than I've ever been. And then I lost the next 6 games in a row. And I ended up losing to people much weaker than me as well. So I wasn't just playing. Once you start losing, you play weaker and weaker players. And so I don't know what happened. Like it was clearly a psychological thing where I was beating these incredible, like world-class players. And then I was losing to players ranked much weaker than me. It's not about the chess. I proved to myself I could play at that world level, but there was something psychological. And that's really what I've been, since that tournament, that's what I've been working on and talking to sports psychologists and other athletes. And I don't know what the issue was. One theory I have is that maybe I thought since I was playing so well against the strong players that I should easily destroy the weak players. So I didn't give them enough respect at the board. So I didn't play consistently. And no matter what you do in life, you have to be consistently good. Like if you're a lawyer, you got to treat every client like the most important client in the world, or you could lose their case and that means their life to them. And somehow I think I didn't have that consistency of focus, and I need to work on that.
I don't know. Do you think that maybe you actually are afraid of becoming too successful at that thing?
it's a tough question because like I was thinking about this earlier also. Like when I was younger, I never thought I had a plateau. I thought I could rise to be, when you're young, you think you could be the best at anything. And maybe you can because you're young and you have the time and you have the years ahead of you and you have the physical conditioning and so on. And only now I realize, I will hit a plateau at everything I ever do.
Oh,
like it will happen. And I never used to think of that as a kid. Like, when I was a kid, if I was playing like a grandmaster at chess, I would think, I had just as much chance of beating him as anybody else. And now I just don't think that way anymore. And even though it might not be true, I have a better chance now than when I was a kid. And, it just, maybe that's the wrong way to think, like to think that you have a plateau. Maybe don't give yourself a plateau and don't be afraid of hitting that plateau. Like maybe you're right. Maybe I'm afraid.
Maybe a question is, does anybody ever actually reach their potential?
I would say like probably Magnus Carlsen, the number one player in the world, or let's say the number one tennis players in the world. I don't know who it is right now, but they probably hit their potential. I think number one hits their potential. And so that's why it's tricky because only one person out of billions could be number one at anything. And that's why it's good to be satisfied with top 1% or top 5% or whatever it is. And it's also important to celebrate the small goals. Like the important thing is not being number one. The important thing is improvement. Like that is what makes, like you were alluding to it earlier, that's what makes you happier is when you're improving at something you love doing. Not being number one at something, because then you always have to defend it. It's not that, it's stressful or whatever. But improving and appreciating the nuances of improving is important.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely going to love this one. Check it out.
Sometimes setting an objective is actually bad for you, especially if you're interested in innovation and creativity and exploration. If you're not willing to take risks, then don't do this and stay in the objective straitjacket because it's safer. But if you want to do something great, this is the only way.